Should everybody homeschool?
I'm going to say no. I don't think it's
All
great.
right.
I don't think it's ideally, I would say yes. Ideally, that would be great. Welcome to the Homeschool Perspective, where seasoned homeschooling moms share tips, insights, and resources to empower your homeschool journey. Join us for real conversations and actionable advice.
Okay, you've heard it. Homeschooling is growing at a rapid rate, going from around 2 million homeschoolers throughout the U.S. in 2014 to over 4 million in 2023.
Families are coming to homeschooling for many different reasons, some with gusto and some with reluctance.
We're really excited to talk to you about all of these things today. But before we do, we wanted to take a minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Ali Adair Chung. I am the mother of 3 awesome, wild kiddos that I homeschool, and I'm a second-generation homeschooler. I've worked with homeschoolers for over a decade and loved every minute of it. Rachel, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am Rachel Figg. I am the owner over at Spark Schooling. I have 4 amazing kids that we have homeschooled since the beginning, and I'm excited to be here.
And what about you, Lisa?
I'm Lisa Yvonne with The Moments at Home. I am a homeschooling mom of 8, 3 who have graduated, and I have been homeschooling for 18 years now.
Wonderful. All right, so today we're going to be talking about, first off, so excited for all of us to be together. This has been lots of conversations happening in just our own discussions coming to life with you guys today, and we're really excited to share and have fun ourselves, hanging out some more. So we are going to be talking about why homeschool today. And the first question I feel like we have to discuss is, should everybody homeschool? This is something, because I think all of us can say we're really passionate about homeschooling, right? So what do you guys think? Should everybody homeschool?
I'm going to say no. I don't think it's
All
great.
right.
I don't think it's ideally, I would say yes. Ideally, that would be great. But practically, should every family homeschool? No. I think it's, it needs to be a family decision. Is it best for your family right now at this time? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so we actually had a season where we had a child in public school. It was a short-lived one. We're definitely homeschoolers, but there are different seasons, different circumstances, and each child is unique, just like each parent who chooses to homeschool or not is unique. And we have to weigh out what's best for our family, for ourselves, because if we're not dedicated and passionate about it, then it's not going to be best for our kids either. And you have to look at all the things, and that answer can change for you. And I think that's totally okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think reassessing regularly and making sure it's a good fit is good, but I don't necessarily agree that not everyone should homeschool. I think, which is why we're having these conversations, right? I think that everyone can homeschool and everyone can be successful. I think the caveat lies in if the parent is excited, engaged, and ready and willing to pour into homeschooling. If you are in a place where, because I've met homeschoolers who are working full-time jobs and they're doing their actual academics in the evening and on weekends. There are a million different ways to do it. So I don't think there's anyone who should just never homeschool unless it's that the parent who will be doing the homeschooling is not in a place to pour into it and make it a priority, and that parent doesn't want to. I think that's really, and from what I've seen, I feel like that's really the only scenario where someone shouldn't homeschool. I think the one who's leading it has to be in it. Do you guys think there's anyone else who should never? Oh, go for it, Rachel.
Well, no, I was just going to say I agree with that. And I think that's what I was thinking when I said that not every family should homeschool, because if the parents are not ready to homeschool, then they're not going to do a good job. They're not going to do that as a service to their kids. It's going to fall short, and they're going to run into issues over and over that they could avoid by having their kids in school. Or I should say, however, there's tons of options to homeschool. Like, homeschooling your kids could look different. There's such a myriad of options to homeschool, even whether or not you might agree with this as homeschooling or not, but homeschooling through the public schools, having school, like public school at home, is an option for some families that work best for them. And what I find is when parents have these options and they have these resources available to them, they're able to homeschool their kids in addition to that.
Mhm.
And even if your kids are in school, public school, private school, online public school, any of those things, they can take those hours that are, that are extra, that are just family time, and really pour into their kids and homeschool them during that time. And they can really view that as homeschooling. So I guess it depends on what your definition of homeschooling is. Is it you're the only one providing education for your kids, or is it all parents are educating our kids? We all have been since they were born.
I think that's such a good point. We've got to talk about, I don't think we addressed this yet, but what is homeschooling? What is it? And with all the myriad of options you were just outlining right now, it's become kind of a spectrum of what homeschooling is. So how would you let's okay, can we each come up with like a one-line definition of what we would think homeschooling is? Because I think that's actually a really good thing to discuss. So many people do it so many different ways. What counts as homeschooling?
So, 2 decades ago, when I first started looking into homeschooling, it was mom did everything. Mom found the information, taught the information, and basically needed a degree in every subject she was teaching to be the expert, and she was responsible for it all. Today, thankfully, it's not like that anymore. And I believe that my responsibility as the homeschooling parent in our family is to curate the best education for my child. So, for instance, I am not artistic and I'm not musical at all. And I'm really not great with STEM. So I went and found a resource, Rachel's actually, that teaches my kids art and music and STEM stuff. So I don't have to do that. And when they get into those higher grade math things, they enroll in classes where someone else teaches them those higher level maths that I am not equipped to. And that is awesome. But I'm still making sure that they have access to those resources and also helping them learn the responsibility of showing up for them and giving their best. And I believe wholeheartedly that that's homeschooling, even though I'm not necessarily teaching all of those things.
I agree. I would say facilitating, be taking on the role of the facilitator and curator, like facilitating their education, making it personal for each child. So even like Lisa, how you said at the beginning that one of your kids was in public school for a time because that was the right choice at the time. That's curating or facilitating their education. It's taking on a very personal role, like your role is ensuring that each of your kids has the best education possible for them. So whatever that looks like, and for you too, for them within your family, right? So what energy you have, what you can bring to the table, what your kids need, and what they can access, like through the internet or through local classes, or maybe it's through a school. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Homeschooling really is.
I say facilitator curator all the time. The only other distinction I would add is that it is the difference between handing off your children's education. So like abdicating the ability to make a decision. Like I think about when you are in a more institutional setting and you like, let's say the teacher and your kiddo just aren't jiving, like it's not working. That decision, you can go and take it and appeal it and see if your child can move classes, but that's ultimately not your choice. Or if your kiddo like needs to sleep in that morning, like you guys had an event the night before, they need to sleep in. That decision, when you are using some of these systems that are all encompassing, that decision's not yours, right? You're putting that in the hands. What topics are being covered? The writing assignment they get to do. If you've got a kiddo, I have a kiddo who's super passionate about comics and all things comics, right? If I assign him something to write, and my goal is for him to learn how to put an essay together, and I assign it on the French Revolution, it's not going to work for him as well as like the history of, Stan Lee's development of Spider-Man, right? And we can get to that skill set through a way that supports him. So it's really being the person who ultimately is making those decisions. It's like getting that ownership. So you're facilitating, you're curating. But I feel like the biggest difference, because we also have a lot of families using things like learning centers and drop off programs now too. And I feel like they get kind of, have you guys noticed this? They're like almost shy to say that they use it because they feel like, oh, well, I don't know if it's really homeschooling.
Right.
But I think the biggest difference is even when you utilize those learning centers and drop offs, you are still in the driver's seat. You get to say like, no, we're coming late today. No, we're not coming today. We're going to change this assignment. We are going to take this class and not this class, and really stay in that place of full control over that facilitating and curating for your unique kid, right? I feel like that's kind of like a running theme. So even if you're utilizing these other resources, you can still be homeschooling when you are in that driver's seat.
That's the important distinction. And I think that one of the things that I love seeing is when a mom steps into that role and owns that she's homeschooling, even when she's using those tools that other people might think of as non-traditional options for homeschooling, and really owns it, because we have different needs. We have medically complex children in our family. We have neurodiversity. We have different needs in our home than perhaps a different family that has an opinion, and we've never walked in each other's shoes. And so we should be supporting each other up as a homeschool community. And it's each family's perspective, each homeschooling parent's perspective, to see their child for who they are and make the decision that's best for them. Also in context of what's best for the family and the other members of it, because those needs do shift and change. Amazing. There's never been a better time in the history of the world to homeschool because of how much support is out there for parents. The hardest thing, though, is that it's never been as hard to homeschool because social media is constantly telling us this is how you should do it. These are the tools that make you a legit homeschool mom, and this is what fake homeschool moms do, or the wannabes. And there are these voices that they hear, depending upon where they're showing up, that can diminish that right to choose in their minds. And that's what I hate seeing. And I love empowering moms to say what's right for you, what's best for your child, what's best for your family. Step into that, own it, and do it. It's amazing.
Gosh, and I feel like, I even fall victim to that. I'm a second generation homeschooler. I teach people how to homeschool, and I will be scrolling and go, ooh, maybe we should be doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not, like, maybe we're missing out. Because it's also, especially if you're a product of not homeschooling, right? Like a product of another system. Because I went to private Catholic school when I was younger, and then I was in traditional public, and then I was homeschooled. And so I have all these other experiences. And frankly, like, we're not taught to like lean into that intuition of what is right for us. So you're always looking for, my favorite question is, what's the best curriculum? And it's like, whichever one works for your family, that's the best curriculum.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, there's so many options. And now I'm off track, but I feel like everybody falls victim to this, and it's really about getting super clear and comfortable with listening to what's right for you and just looking at your children in front of you, and making decisions for them. All right. So you guys, we've talked about, should everyone homeschool? What is homeschooling? What do you think are the best and worst reasons to homeschool? Oh, like, I see the faces like this could be awesome.
This is a can of worms. This is why our podcast is called the Homeschool Perspective. I think that the best reasons to homeschool are to give your kids that customized learning experience. For, that having that mindset, having that goal of it's customized, curated, you're a facilitator, all those things we were just talking about, like that is the best reason to homeschool. Like having your kids do things that are personalized for them, like just having that as your goal. I don't know, like that's what I think as far as like, that's what I'm looking for,
Yeah. Well, and that gives you like meat to hang on to like, or like, something to like grip into to build on. Cause I feel like, do you guys hear, there's a lot of reasons to homeschool. And I think that you have to be mindful of making sure that at least one of those reasons is something you can build on instead of something that you're running away from. Right? Because there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons to leave traditional education. And they are all good reasons. And if it feels right, if you're like, no, this is my instincts are telling me we got to go because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's, whatever it is. I think you also need a reason that's going to be something to build on and not just something to lean away from. You know what I mean? So I love what you were saying about like the reason to homeschool being building something that's unique to them, because it's something you can actually do something with.
And actually, that's the reason we started homeschooling in the first place, is because I just wanted to customize everything. When my oldest was little, I wanted to customize everything. I wanted to give him, the best way for him to learn all of these things. And it was so exciting. And I went probably a little bit overboard, finding all the resources out there and thinking that we could do all of them. But when we it wasn't until my second was born and ready to homeschool was it like, oh, like this kid needs to be homeschooled. My second child would not have thrived, would not have survived in a public school or private school setting, in a traditional school setting. Like my oldest, he could have gone either way. Like I, felt like the best decision for him was to homeschool so we could customize things, so we could do what was best. We could find all of the best curriculum, the best ways for him specifically to learn. But when it was my second, he just had some learning challenges that were very, very apparent from, from early on, that it was like, wow, this, if we weren't homeschooling before, we would be now, at least for this kid. So there's another reason. There's all sorts of good reasons, I feel like.
What do you think, Lisa?
So I think one of the worst reasons to homeschool would be fear or guilt, right? Like if you're always making decisions out of fear or guilt, like I should be doing this, you're not going to make it. They could be what start you. They could be a catalyst, right? But they're not going to sustain you when it gets hard. And we all know, if we've been doing this for any amount of time, it gets hard. It's exhausting. I don't know about you guys, but like every February, I'm like reassessing. Okay, we're still alive. We're still on track. We're gonna make this. I'm not. It's just kind of like almost scheduled onto the calendar. Homeschool mom burnout hits. So now we know, like, we take breaks and we do more fun things. We've learned a lot over the years. And yes, we started in that place, but it wasn't enough to keep us going. What kept us going, what our passion is and our reason for homeschooling, is that we believe that family is the foundation that gives our kids the confidence and the launch pad for future success. And the more time they have with the family supporting their dreams, the stronger that future will look for them. And so that's why we do it. That's our big why. And of course, their academics are of paramount importance. We're educating them, but we don't let that be the driver. I'm not educating because I'm afraid they won't get a good enough education in public school, or that private school will, dim their personality or something like that. While those things might be true, I'm not doing it because of the fear or anything. I'm doing it because we want to. And I think the best reason to homeschool is whatever drives you and your family, and what will pull you through those hard times and those hard seasons when your kids are screaming, I hate this. And you're right next to them going, I do too.
You're like, awesome. This day's hard. Let's not do that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Our big reason for homeschooling, I feel like we have a myriad, and we could talk about the, I think it's not bad to have, like you said, the catalyst, my kiddo, is, not thriving. We're worried about safety. We're worried about these things, and having that be the catalyst. But when you come into homeschooling with only that piece, you don't know what to do. Like there's just too big of a pool to pull from to figure it out. I know for us, I was homeschooled at the end of high school. And I was like, this is amazing. And I went into, and I got multiple credentials. I was like, I'm going to bring this cool stuff into the schools. It's going to be great. Because I started, and then my parents brought everybody home, and like, it was so transformative for our family. And yes, it helped with our family relationships, but as we got older, like when I was dating my husband, I was like, just so you know, because when it was starting to look like it was going towards marriage, I was like, my children will be homeschooled. So you got to decide if your children,
you knew,
children,
you were ready.
we're doing this. But my biggest why is I want them to be completely free and becoming whoever they're intended to be. I want to eliminate or limit the amount of things that get layered on top of who they are, so that they have the ability, the mindset for financial, time, location, freedom, and they can live values led lives. Like that's our primary driving force in our family. And you have, I feel like you have to have that secondary reason. You have to have that one reason that's propelling you forward.
I totally agree. And we have a similar background, Allie. I never realized that until today. I actually did private Catholic school too when I was really
I didn't
like,
know that.
yeah, like so specific. Like we did private Catholic school. I went to a public school for a long time. Then we switched to a private Christian school, and then I graduated as a homeschooler. So it's very similar. And I didn't realize. Yeah. And I think that the family dynamics, like the family relationships that I have now, especially with my siblings, and one in particular, the one that I'm closest in age to, we homeschooled side by side that year. And it was just really, really good for our relationship. When you were saying that, I wonder what that would have looked like if we hadn't had that. Because when you're in school, in high school, you don't see your siblings. We went to the same high school, but it wasn't, you don't see them because you're in different classes and stuff. So it's those family relationships are so important. And like those are your people for the most part, for that, those are your people for the rest of your life. Like the friends fall away. Some of them you stay in contact with, some of them you stay close to, but it's your family that is really important for the rest of your life. And those are the relationships that you should be investing in. And homeschooling just gives such a unique opportunity for that. I don't know, Lisa, do you have adult kids that have homeschooled? So what do you see as far as that, like with their relationship?
So our family is really close knit. I was an only child with a single mom. I grew up in public school. I went to a private Christian school for a few years and then went back to public school. My only exposure to homeschooling was a family that I helped babysit for. They had 8 kids and they homeschooled. And they were the closest group of siblings I had ever seen. And it kind of planted a seed. Man, I want that if I have kids someday. Now, mind you, I went right engaged in going through premarital counseling. I agreed to maybe one. I really wasn't sure about the whole motherhood thing, and I really didn't think I was cut out to be a mom.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And you ended up with 8?
And then after we had the first one, I was like, okay, it's time to go get a vasectomy because I fulfilled my end of the bargain. We have one.
I'm shocked right now.
This is good. And God had a totally different plan for our lives, obviously. And I love having 8. And there's a part of me that's like, man, come on, what about 9 or 10? I don't know. I love our large family. But the coolest thing to me has been we have like 2 groups of kids. So we have our oldest 3, our 2 in the middle have special needs, and then we have our youngest 3. So right now I'm homeschooling 2 groups of kids, and then I have this group of graduates, right? And it's so funny because my younger ones will sometimes like complain or whine or do something. And an older sibling, one of their graduates, will come up and go, oh my gosh, I loved when we got to this unit study. You guys, like, this is so cool. And they will sit down on the floor with them and dive into the books and go through it. And I'm like, this is so cool. They're like so excited to share with them. Or they'll come alongside and they'll like pick up the pot, to see what's cooking. And they're like, oh, are you guys on the unit study on India or something like that? Because they'll remember that we did some of these activities and they love it. And so I like seeing the joy that they're expressing, that they experienced. And one of my kids recently came to me, one of my adult kids, and said, thank you so much for doing that. Because I know it was really out of your comfort zone and really hard for you because, it was my first homeschooled kid that was saying this. And I was like, yeah, it was definitely kind of a wild experiment that we did. I gave myself permission to do it just for kindergarten and then just for first grade. The next thing I knew, she was in junior high. There's a whole bunch of other kids in our dining room table doing homeschool. And I was like, whoa, how did this happen? But they loved it. And the neatest thing for us, so we have some adopted kids and some biological kids. There was this beautiful season of integration into the family that went so differently because we homeschooled, because we had that time and that space. And we could kind of hit pause on our traditional studies and study their culture and their experiences. and let them figure out who they were as a person and really explore what they wanted to be and do with their future, and then create this custom path for that child to walk. It was so beautiful to have them come back and say, this changed my life. Like, this was so awesome. Thank you for doing that. And it just makes it all worth it, even when it's hard. And then we have these two kids in the middle with these really unique needs and these different ways of learning. And we tried public school. There was a season there where there was more support available to us when I was still learning how to advocate as a new mom of a homeschooling child. And I thought this was the avenue that was best for us. And our son actually didn't thrive as well as we had hoped he would. And another therapist came alongside and said, if you know how to advocate, you can get this same support while you're homeschooling. I was like, no way. Tell me more, right? Obviously, that was a game changer for us. And we were able to do things with JJ that we couldn't do with him in public school. And he learns with music. So we do things by drum beats, and we have taught him how to be social and interact. And obviously his IEP is really different than my neurotypical child that's next to him in age. But we can do that, and we can customize it because he's not in a classroom full of other kids. And so while we might have started with those fears, like, hey, he's having more seizures because he's exposed to germs, and he's losing so many days of school because of sickness and all of these things, we kept going because we saw that it was changing his life just the same way as it was changing his siblings' lives. So our experience has just been that it's absolutely awesome. And we're graduating, our third one graduated this year. They just wrapped up for the year. So that's awesome. We'll have another one graduating next year. And then we have a little bit of a break from graduations as everybody else kind of catches up.
My goodness, graduation. I feel like I want to like round of applause you.
Yeah.
Because it's just it gets to be such a celebration. And I feel like, I know sibling squabbling is something that like all of us as homeschooling parents get an extra dose of, but it's those shared experiences, right? Like the shared experiences and the witnessing of each other that I feel like it gets missed out when you wake up in the morning, you separate, you sleep, and then you see each other on the weekends. Like there's a witnessing of like really knowing the people that are in your family, and then like having these shared experiences, like sitting down when it's the India study, or like those things that the read alouds you do together as a family, whatever it is for your family. I feel like those two things are just treasures. They're absolute treasures in homeschooling. So yes, a little more squabbling, but like ultimately it's just such a gift.
Conflict resolution too, though, right? Like our kids
learning new skills.
They're learning how to communicate better. They're learning how to self-advocate. They're learning how to know who they are and stand up to someone freely and say, no, this is who I am. My 6-year-old the other day, somebody said, oh, you should wear this dress. It's so cute. It'll look great on you. She goes, thank you very much. And didn't take it. And they're like, well, no, you should put it on. And she goes, no, I shouldn't. It's not my style. And
I love her.
And I was love it, right?
Stories about her. I'm just
it's fabulous.
She knows who she is because she was raised by parents who empower her to do that, but also by the example of 7 older siblings who have the permission to be who they are. And she's learned from watching them that she can have opinions and she can be respectful. She says thank you, but she knows, and it's okay. And so many of her little friends are, oh, that's cool. Okay, I want that. And she's like, why? Why do you want it? What makes it cool? And I love that individuality that we get to foster, but also at the same time, they're part of a super tight-knit group, and that group is called Brothers and Sisters.
I have started to see, because my oldest is 13, and I've started to see that where he sees his younger siblings going through those same things that he has gone, that he's done, and he jumps in, just like you were saying, Lisa, jumps in, and he's like, oh, cool, you're learning that. And then the educational side of that is that he's revisiting those concepts. He's revisiting that, even though it's not in his path for the year, his planned path for the year, he's revisiting those concepts and those ideas, and it's just strengthening further in his mind. Plus, it's sparking more like curiosity about it, where he can go and learn deeper on it, on his own. He can go, maybe he sees a book in the library that's set in the same setting, or he sees something, I don't know, a show that relates back to what they're learning. It's, he's not technically learning that right now, but he's interested in it again because his siblings are going through it. And so he takes on this personal learning from it where he's excited that they're doing it. So he goes and gets curious and learns even more or even deeper. And I see this with actually both of my oldest too, that they do this. And it's really fun as the parent to witness. And it's strengthening their sibling bond. It's strengthening all of that, but also they're learning more and they're learning how to become lifelong learners, which is another huge benefit to homeschooling. Like why you should homeschool, you have this ability to foster lifelong learning and a love for it. Your kids see you as the homeschooling parent loving learning. Otherwise, you wouldn't be invested in their learning. So they're seeing that modeled for them. They're seeing the example of a lifelong learner in action. Homeschool moms are lifelong learners. They are learning how to do it. They're learning how to homeschool. Plus, we're learning, what predicate nouns are all over again alongside of our kids. So it is just a whole, gamut of lifelong learning happening from and modeling that for our kids that sets them up to become lifelong learners themselves.
Mhm. Well, and with how rapidly the world is changing, it just keeps speeding up, right? Like as fast as it's going now, it's just going to double and triple time. So the more comfortable you are with going and seeking out a resource and learning a new concept and just knowing that that's life and it's not, okay, well, I passed that and now I'm terrified of trying something because I don't want to fail at it, right? That lifelong learning will set them up because we have no idea what it's going to look like in 20 years when they're all in the workforce firmly. Like we have no idea. No idea. My kiddos, my oldest, like they will see something at the library that they're like, oh, yes, she's covering that. And they'll pull books for each other. But then really they want to read them aloud. You know what I mean? Like they're like, because, it might not be cool to do that, but like, oh, well, I'm helping. And then they're pulling all these things to revisit. It's so fun. I love it.
We
All right.
take
So we talked.
a book to a younger sibling the other day. He's like, if you finish this book, we can watch the movie together. And I was like, that's for next year's history. He goes, yeah, but I really want to rewatch the movie. So he's got to hurry up and read the book. And I'm like, okay, this is off, but they love it. And there's this secret moment, we're all talking about how cool it is to see the kids doing it, but come on, don't you kind of on the inside go, yes, like,
Yeah.
right? Like, woo, high five.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, and then getting to show them the things that I love, like revisiting like the American Girl books or, stuff like that. It's just fun and nostalgic. All right, you guys. So we touched on this a little bit before. So now we know what homeschooling is, all the reasons, the benefits, the reasons not to homeschool or to consider not homeschooling. So once you made the decision, how do you ensure you stay on the right path, that it continues to be a good choice for you? Now, Lisa, you talked about this a little bit, like there was a time when you guys made the choice to go into public and then come back. So what's the process that you guys have in your own families to ensure that like this is still the right call, right direction for you?
For us, it's just assessing year to year. Just, is this the right path? Is this working? And even not is homeschooling specifically the right path for us, but is this particular resource that we are using the right resource for right now? And sometimes it is, and then, and we're like, yep, love that. We're going to keep going. It's working. Sometimes it's working for these kids, but it's not so much working for these kids. So we're going to switch it up. We're going to find something else that does. So that just constant reassessing. We've switched it all up in the middle of the year. We've added things in the middle of the year. We're not afraid to abandon and try something new. And I think that's key, is as the parent, keeping the open mind of, Just because you purchase something doesn't mean that it's going to work. And it is trial and error, keeping that mindset of this is all an experiment. This is just, we're going to keep focused. But I think it's the focus. Like if you have the focus for doing the right thing for each of your kids and having that role of facilitator and curator, with that role, you're going to constantly be assessing and reassessing. That's how we do it.
Yeah, we do something similar, but what are like the specific things that you see that tell you? Because I'm just thinking as a mom listening to this right now, I might be like, okay, but how do I know it's not working?
Oh,
Like, how do I know?
you hate it.
What are your, I'm like, I've got it in my brain. I can see, I'm like, I know what doesn't work for us, but what do you guys see in your families and your children that make you go, nope, that's this, we need to reassess? Or because there's also just bad days, right? Like we all have bad days or like a particular subject. Maybe it's fractions where you're just going to have to kind of work through it. But what do you guys, what's your line where you're like, okay, this thing's now happened. So now it's time to reassess. Like, what are your guys' specific things?
So reassessing whether homeschooling is working or whether the tools we're using in homeschooling is working, because that's a totally different question you're asking.
You're right. Totally different. Well, I was kind of bouncing off what Rachel was talking about with like the specific parts of your homeschooling. So like maybe changing curriculum.
Okay. So, because the first thing I thought you were asking, like, how do you know if homeschooling is still right for you? And what else?
Yeah, but then we went this route. And I feel like it's a really good one.
We're committed to homeschooling. Like we're not going back. So we are a homeschooling family and we will stay a homeschooling family because I want to be in the driver's seat of my child's education until they're old enough to take the driver's seat for themselves. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning and the end of it, we have family meetings where we assess if what we're doing as a family is working, and homeschooling is a part of those meetings. And so we get the kids' feedback. Now, we have had at like different points in history where like, I really don't like history right now. And I'm like, okay, I get that. Fair enough. And maybe we do fewer projects and move through that section of history fast. They can still narrate it. They can still tell you about it. But we might not linger. Whereas if we hit a period of history where they're super passionate about it, we might park ourselves there for a little while and do projects and maybe, more read alouds and cooking classes and I don't know, all the things. Mm-hmm. And so we look at it from an interest level on one hand, but on another, if they're constantly hating it, it's not right for us, because my barometer first is their level of joy in the learning process. Maybe not in the subject material, but the process. As long as if it's turning them off from learning, if they're going, I don't want mm-hmm. to learn, we have a deeper issue that we need to fix. And we need to figure out where the breakdown is. Is it a style of learning that's not working for them? Is it just a frustration with a subject matter? Like I remember crying as a high schooler in algebra because my brain just didn't understand it, mm-hmm. but acing geometry without a problem. So sometimes there are things that you've got to muscle through, and we have to equip our kids to cope with that.
Right.
But I also have a child who's incredibly tactile. If they read something, they do not remember it at all. But if they do it, they will never forget it. Mm-hmm. So handing that to a book and say, hey, tell me what you think about this is not going to work.
Right.
And I had to learn that the hard way because my first 4 kids, they're all book like learners. They want to read about it and then do something with it. Mm-hmm. This other one wants to maybe listen to an audio while he's building a Lego diorama of it. And I had to learn how to make school interesting to him and how to help him want to learn. So again, it's not really whether or not we're committed to the lifestyle. It's a matter of what is the right tool for this child in this season with these abilities in this subject. And that sounds really overwhelming, but it's not, because you're the expert on your kid, right? Like you don't need someone else to tell you what makes your child happy or what frustrates them. And you can go find what will help them. And it's a lot easier than you realize. Like we do it naturally as parents in parenting all day long. And when you're a homeschooling mom, after the first couple of years, you're going to do it naturally and instinctively without even realizing you're doing it until you look in the rearview mirror, right? Because you're sitting in the driver's seat. When you look behind you, you're going to, oh, wow, I missed all those potholes. And what a cool detour that we took to get to the destination, even though you're just doing it naturally in daily life. And so I don't think that it's a conscious reassessing so much on a day-to-day basis, But quarterly, when we have our big family meetings where we say, how is everybody's chores going? How are your areas of responsibility working? How are your social clubs working? The time that you're spending out of the house? What would you like to see change? How's school going for you? What do you think? And it's this open space where we just hold everything with open hands. Nothing is to be criticized or praised. And we take their feedback and we run with it.
Yep. We do the same. We add the kids in. They set goals at the beginning of the year. They help us choose curriculum. I always kind of narrow it down, and then we work on making decisions together. But I will say, never make these decisions on a bad day. Like, don't, because there are so many different reasons for a bad day, and it could be hormones, kids, or there's just like so many things that can be. So I'll say, like, it's not something you want to be making a change on day to day, because life happens and people are human and it gets more complicated. Have you guys ever changed a curriculum or made an adjustment to your homeschool based solely on your experience of it and not necessarily your kids' reaction?
100%.
Talk about that, because I think that's something frankly, I think there's a lot of guilt associated with, like, this is what's supposed to be best for my kiddo, and so I'm going to have to white knuckle through it. And that's not best. So can we just talk about that for a second? Because I think that's a thing. Have you guys ever done that? Made a change because it was just not overstimulating, whatever it was? Anybody want to share?
I will.
Yeah.
When we were starting homeschooling, I was so drawn to the idea of read alouds for history, doing like the whole Charlotte Mason thing, like just reading. Practically, when it got down to it, I could not sustain the actual the reading of the material. We didn't stay on task. Like, it was me. Like, I just can't sit down and read to my kids, apparently. Like, that was a real struggle for me. So I found a different resource that was video based. It was screen based. It was like my kids logged in, they told stories, they told it, and they assessed them, and it's like 100%, like, they take care of it now. And so I changed that for me. Like, they liked both options. They were fine with what we were doing before, except for that we weren't doing it because it just wasn't working for me. But now we've got something else, a tool that we're using that helps us stay focused and stay on pace. And I can choose read alouds that fit with their time period of history. We can do food, and we can do cooking. We could do all of these other things that work and tie in, but it's not on me. Like, if I did nothing, they would be fine. But I can do more of that, what I initially wanted to do or thought that was going to work for me. I can pull that in small doses, but I don't have to keep struggling through something that just did not work for me.
Yeah. It was math. I was really having a hard time with one of my kids with math. And someone was like, oh, hey, we're done with our teaching textbooks. Do you want to borrow them? And I was like, no, we use this. And she looked at me and she's like, so what? Do you want to try them or not? And I was like, wait, you mean I could like change my mind? Like, I didn't sign a contract. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was such an eye-opening moment. I was like, sure, cool, let's try it. And my kid loved it, and I loved it because I wasn't struggling, like staying up late at night trying to learn math the night before, because that was what we were doing. And it was so awesome. And then I'm laughing when you said the Charlotte Mason and the read aloud thing, because we started there. We really did. But we have 8 kids.
Right.
Like, there
A lot of different books.
Yeah, like a dozen years of my life pregnant and breastfeeding. There are seasons where it's just not realistic. I'm morning sick, 6 hours a day on the bathroom floor, trying to read novels, sitting on the floor next to the toilet to my kids, in between vomiting with my 7th child's pregnancy. And I'm like, this is not working. Like, this didn't work. So my oldest was awesome. He went to the library and he found audiobooks for some of the things. And he was like, okay, listen, I can hit play and give them a snack. You go puke. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And it was a great solution for that season. And then after he was born and there was no more morning sickness, I was tired and I didn't want to read aloud. So we kind of kept rolling with that audiobook system, and it really worked for us. Like, it was a cool pivot. And then we had this other curriculum, and it's a really good one, like no shade on the curriculum at all, but it did not work for me as a teacher. For whatever reason, I struggled with answering their questions about it, getting excited about it for them. And it, like that affects their desire to show up when they're younger, especially. And so we changed to something that I loved, and they naturally got excited to see what I was excited about.
Yep.
Love it too. And so there are times, and earlier I was like, oh, no, 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 no. Don't feel guilty about it, because as moms, that's like, to me, that's part of homeschool mom self-care, right? Curriculum that I don't hate, that's the part of homeschool mom self-care for me. That's what allows me to stay in the game for almost 20 years.
Right.
And I've got a 6-year-old, so like I've got
Got a ways to go.
And more than me, and I can't be burnt out by curriculum that makes me want to cry. That's not
done. Well, and if you think about like your favorite teachers, the people who taught you the most, there's usually a common thread of the fact that they were enjoying what they were teaching and how they were teaching it. You don't have to enjoy everything you're teaching your kids. Like that's not humanly possible. But in general, if you have like a malaise or exhaustion at even thinking about doing all the read alouds, for me, it was, we started with very like hands-on project-based, setting up all the things. And I did that with my first. And then I got to my second, and then I got to and I finally had to go, you know what? I'm just a different person too. Like I've changed.
Right.
My capacity has changed, that my own interests have changed. And like, I had so much guilt about like, I did this like cute, all the project-y things with the firstborn, and now I'm not. And like, I had this whole mental thing. I'm like, but I've changed as a person, and they're changing and growing. And now we found a really great spot. So I'm so glad I'm so glad that came up from the question, because I think that there's a lot of us out there. And if a family, if someone's listening to this and they're just getting started or considering, just knowing that you can get to the good stuff, like you can get to this really sweet spot, and it can start one way and completely transform to get you there. And that is all okay. It's all okay as long as your family is thriving and enjoying the process. I think that's my biggest takeaway from our conversation today. But what about you guys? What's your like biggest takeaway from everything we discussed? We talked about so much.
I think that there's no right way to do it. It's homeschooling is whatever journey you want to walk that's best for you and your family, in whatever way you want to make it happen for you and your family, and to just do it for the reasons that are right for you and your family. It's a totally customizable experience.
Absolutely.
And it's totally your perspective to make those choices.
Yeah. And that's what we're all about here. We're talking about your perspective, your family, your homeschool. Like that's what this podcast is for. And that's what we are here, is to have these conversations, to give you the permission to homeschool in the way that is best for you and your family and your kids, and customizing it. I think the biggest takeaway here is where we're talking about what homeschooling is in the first place. And I don't know, I would just say that every family homeschools to some degree, whether their kids are in school or not. Every family, every set of parents out there is responsible for the education of their children, and you are doing that whether you're 100% homeschooling your kids at home and doing that with your kids now, or it's coming to you in the future and you're just thinking about it and you're dabbling in, is this right for me? Can I do this? Yes, you can, because you already have been. You were there guiding your kids when you were teaching them to walk. You taught them how to eat, how to use a spoon, how to go to the bathroom. You have been there for so much of their education already. And that's all homeschooling is continuing that. And there's so many resources like we've been talking about. There's the permission to switch things up. There's the permission to change, the whole system, the whole thing. Like how me and Allie were talking about how our whole growing up years was just a constant change. Like we went back and forth for all sorts of different things. You have that responsibility and that privilege with your kids to help them become lifelong learners, to help guide their education in the way that is perfect for them, that fits with your family.
And on that note, that was perfect. We're going to close out. And you know what? Thank you so much for being here with us today. please, we are just getting started. There is so much more to come. So make sure that you subscribe. We are so excited to have you here. We're so excited to share this and really help put you in the driver's seat, your family, your homeschool, and we'll see you next time.